closely followed behind by Mr. Lloyd Bass. And last and by certainly no means least, quite the opposite, Steph Kelly. Now, over the course of today, we're primarily going to be talking to these incredible people about the work they do, how they did it, and what childhood trauma drove them into the professions they have now. But part of this as well is we're going to be unveiling Dinner Geek's top 5 car chases of all time. We know this is very contentious. Any top lists of anything are always contentious. So everyone, our panelists, the audience, feel free to disagree. So we will be counting down from 5 to 1 over the course of the panel. But first I'm going to start off with each of you, Rick, Lloyd and Steph. How on earth did you get into this? What was that moment that made you love the sense of speed, stunt, vehicles?
I grew up with my dad was into motorcycles and stuff, and so I always grew up around motorcycles and everything. Was always interested in motorcycles, and I started racing pretty late actually, in my kind of late teens and stuff. And then at the same time as that, I'd been training in martial arts and everything for a long time, and so I already had a big interest in action movies. And basically, to cut a long story short, I moved down to London with the view of getting into action movies, more in the fighting side and everything, but because I was racing and everything as well, it just made sense then to get onto the British Stunt Register, and I just naturally ended up drifting towards the motorsports side of that as well as the other stuff.
We maybe swap back. What about? Oh, thank you, Grace. What about yourself, Lloyd? What's your entry into this world you're in now?
So mine started very early on in my life. I think I was about 8, something like that. And I quite often said I wanted to do stunts. And I think it was probably all of the fantastic sort of shows that were on the television, all the Ball Guard in the early days and stuff like that were, I suppose, convinced me that was a great idea. You know, there was a few kids at school who talked about, you know, sort of doing stunts. I think I was the only one that made it out of that group. But essentially, it was actually more the knowing I wanted to do it and then finding what I wanted to do, really. You know, and I always liked cars anyway. My family was big into cars and racing and stuff like that. So essentially, I learned to drive when I was 12, and then at the moment I owned my own car. I literally just drove the wheels off it until I crashed probably 30 a year for several years. So yeah, it really just realised it was probably my thing. So specialised in cars, obviously, but did all the training first.
Who taught you to drive at 12, or was it you?
Was it something my brother and my dad. But yeah, my dad was less confident than my brother was.
What about yourself, Steph?
I, like probably all of us, sporty kid, and didn't know about the job really of getting, you know, the British Stunt Register. It wasn't till slightly later in life that I came upon it, you know, early mid-20s maybe. So you're a competitive swimmer, then you find out what you need to get onto the Stunt Register, you go off and you get all the relevant qualifications. Then the car element came. I mean, I like messing around in cars, and but in terms of as a sport, the cars, which essentially helped me in my job and opened up the world in the stunt world, which was auto testing, which is relevant to quite a lot of the jobs that you get. So yeah, I was already on the. I heard of the stunts and then thought that's what I'm going to do, because everything leads up to it. The thing, you know, your background of sports and other things, and then the cars just grew separately, if you like. I used to mess around in them, but then I found the sport that I loved, which was the auto testing.
When did you first start doing this professionally as opposed to joyriding and taking a car early on, in terms of as a first time your paycheck came from something like this?
I wasn't the joyrider, remember, that was Lloyd said he was the joyrider. When did I start making a living from stunts?
Yeah, what was your first paycheck for this?
In stunts? Yeah. It's a great question. I think...
If you want to say
no, go ahead.
So I joined in 1999, and my first job was a casualty. I was a passenger in a car, crashing into a skip.
There's always crashes on casualty.
And that was my first day of work. Yeah, absolutely. And it was terrifying and exciting all at the same time.
I think my first job was actually a small movie with Ed Furlong called I don't remember what it's called, about some internet killer or something, but anyway, I was on a motorcycle and I had Amelia Fox on the back and we were cutting through traffic and doing all that kind of stuff. And I think I was actually doubling Chiwetel Ejiofor at the time.
Of course.
That's
Absolutely.
that's when it was. It was a long time ago. It was a different time.
My first stunt job was a stair fall. I've always liked stair falls, but my first car job, if I remember rightly, was a knockdown, knocking somebody over. So yeah, jumping into the flames, as they say.
And I was going to say, because in all of these things, as an audience, we look at it and stuff looks absolutely amazing. Some of the things may be much easier to do than they look. Some things may be much harder. An innocuous thing like a fall could require a hell of a lot of effort to pull off. You don't see behind the scenes. What are the things that you found, particularly as you've been learning, that have been the most challenging things to get used to get better at what you do?
For me, I think that on set, that is where most of your learning comes from, and there's kind of a progression where you'll start off on the big calls. You'll be one of 20 guys that are driving background cars essentially, but every one of those vehicles is important. You can't have any of those vehicles out of place because it affects the main action and everything. And so you kind of learn through being on the job and and being given smaller responsibilities, but still important responsibilities. And then once people get to know you and you get familiar with those positions, then eventually you find that you're one of the cars that's interacting with the lead vehicles. And then eventually driving the lead vehicles and stuff is definitely a progression that that's very important to go through, and it's important to go through all of those steps, I think.
What about yourself, Will?
Well, actually, that was very well put, Rick. I have to say, because I think a lot of the input a performer can have is the little things being done really well, and ultimately those little things grow into bigger things, and you get better opportunities. But essentially, even a stair fall is a multiple person gig. Now, it might be that we're doing a stair fall, so we're the performer falling down the stairs. But there's lots of other things to consider, the preparation before that. What is the actual shot? Never mind just falling down the stairs. Is it important you turn your face towards the camera or away from the camera at a certain point? There's a lot more to it than that. So I think even a stair fall, which is basically just plunging yourself down the stairs, actually has so many different elements to it that even that's not a little thing. Do you know what I mean? So I think really it's do everything very well, no matter how little it may seem, and then ultimately you will be given the best opportunities from that, because people learn to trust you, and people learn to or learn that you may have more capabilities than they've seen so far, and then you just get huge opportunities after that.
I can't really add too much more from what the guys have said. It's definitely everything on that, and then also showing an aptitude that you would like to do more, I suppose. Being too keen before you're ready doesn't go in your favour. I think you just have to put it nicely. It's just a build up really, and people can see that they can trust you. There's a lot of pressure on you when you're doing some of the bigger gags that are expected of you, and I think you can only do that by doing the smaller stuff is a way to put it, isn't it? Just being amongst it and
it's kind of
seeing.
learning to walk before you can run.
Definitely.
Kind of scenario,
there's-
when you're running on a film, and you're the lead double, and you're doing some epic driving for a film set. That can't be your first day at work.
No.
That's got to be a long way in.
No. The money involved in the sequences that has to go right, and there aren't second chances. So
Absolutely. Now, we're going to roll the first clip out of 5, and as an example again of something that you're going to have to turn around and crane up the screen, but actually, why did we think of doing that before? The first example, so at number 5, ladies and gentlemen, we have... Just say that. That is, I know this, one of the producers, Ian Smith, who works on that, is a friend. I mean, there's always a sense, really, that trying to do as much as you can for real on camera and so on. But that, what George did there was sort of something else. I don't know, and forgive me, that you must have, in all of these that we'll see, people you'll know connected to all of that. What are your impressions of Mad Max Fury Road, Rick?
That's like a car chase on an epic scale. Everything, because it's so wide open there as well. It's all, a lot of it's in the sound, obviously through the dunes and stuff. To make it look exciting, you've either got to use obviously tight shots, because anything bigger where you're seeing the whole geography of the thing will just make the energy just go down so much. It'll just look so slow. There's nothing when you're shooting in a city or anything like that, and there's things strobing past camera, gives a real impression of speed. Whereas when you're just in a wide open space like that, you've got to make everything big, and yeah, some of the cannons and the bike crashes on there were pretty big. So there's some pretty big speeds involved. It's my kind of thing. I like that kind of stuff.
Is there a sense that people sort of gravitate towards really loving to do stunts on 2 wheels or 4, or is it just you don't mind either?
I think generally there's almost like they go sort of hand in hand, but they're not really, if you know what I mean. Like most of us have ridden motorcycles, and we might have tried to trip motorcycles a little bit, stuff like that. Then, of course, you've got the Rick scale, which is the other end of the riding scale, you know. Most of us can ride a bike, you know, we might be able to put a little wheel in to stop it in, but our input would be more, not the big gags like Rick would on the bikes, but mine particularly. But I would understand the timing of what Rick's doing, and I would play my part with Rick very, very well. Do you know? Because that's my job in that scene. Whereas Rick might be doing a 200-foot wheelie through traffic. You know, so I might have to cut him up at the last minute, but I'll be there. You know what I mean? And I know Rick.
Massive, isn't it?
I'm not supposed to. But.
Well, yeah, that's sort of reset. No. Yeah. But I think also when you look at things like the Fury Road, I mean, any shot that's that epic, you have to think about the camera angles as well as the performance of the thing. So we may do an epic stunt in a car or a bike or whatever it may be, but if it isn't captured, it won't look good. You know, it's just a thing then. It's just, oh, look at that, great, that's amazing. But it doesn't look great. When you mix that in with the cinematography and all of the other elements to it, all of a sudden they become epic pieces. You know?
And I mean, I know we touched upon casualty earlier in the sense that obviously a lot of stunts happen on TV, and part of what we're looking to celebrate, you know, it's not just about the craft of film, but particularly TV. And obviously the budgets in TV with streamers have gone up. There is stuff that has been made, sadly, just for the small screen that really deserves to be seen on a big one as well. But you know, when it comes to sort of something like that, has the fact that the streamers have come aboard just given the stunt community a lot more opportunities to do more or different stuff, or again it's really they haven't pushed the boat, it's still the bigger stuff, like something like Fury Road or a Bond that goes?
To be honest, I don't want to step on you, Steph.
No.
But personally, I think that it's always been film was the thing that everybody considered that was where the big gags were. And to be fair, in the main, it could well still be, but not necessarily in the severity of the gag, more in the size of the setup of the gag. So actually, I think in TV we've probably done some epic gags over the years, epic, you know, and you'll be afforded far less rehearsal time, you know. So you need to be able to hit that ground and run with it almost from the word go. You know, you might get a 2-hour rehearsal in the morning to shoot in the afternoon, and you may not get to rehearse your cannon in your car. You just got to know you're going to be there. You know, so I think there's a lot more expectation that you have to shoot things maybe just a little bit quicker. But I don't think it diminishes the size of them, the gap.
Steph, is there ever enough time to really prepare? Or is it like ultimately, if you were given 3 weeks, you take 3 weeks, if you given 3 days, you take 3 days?
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. No, just...
Yeah.
yeah.
I suppose essentially, if productions are going to afford you 3 weeks to rehearse the thing, it's what are you going to gain in that time? So you have to then structure your rehearsals to understand that you can perfectly execute that when you get there. So other than that, it's just 3 weeks for the sake of 3 weeks. That's, you know, how can you utilise it?
Yeah, it kind of depends where you're starting from as well and what your end goal is. You might be developing a vehicle to do a very specific stunt with a very specific look, and it might be that the first time you test that it needs major changes. You need to make changes and modifications to the vehicle to achieve what you want. And so it's nice to have that time. Just because you have 3 weeks, it doesn't mean that you'll be necessarily running up to the ramp and back every day for 3 weeks. There's a lot of stuff that goes on with other departments in between, because it's a whole big team effort.
It's quite a good point, because with the Batmobile, in all honesty, that's what it was like. It was weeks and weeks and weeks of testing and changing, and the vehicles are incredible, and I'm sure you'll get onto that later, but that's a very good example of how you use your time, and each day might have to be a bit more organic than the last, because you don't know what's going to happen. You know if anything's going to break. You don't know if all of a sudden what you've changed there now affects 4 other things. Yeah. So sometimes there's this huge expectation that you could do like for instance the jump fairly quickly. Really, I mean we can line it up, we can do some test runs, great. But it's all the timing then of the penguin car, for instance, or it's it's all those things, and every one thing knocks onto the other. So that's where you utilise the rehearsal time more.
Or car chases in films. It's another where your lead character is a driver, and so much of it is particular. I love that film. Is there a sense of particularly this film, that you've got to approach it very, very differently at all when it's so much of it is around that central character who is a driver? So the whole film revolves around him rather than just being a part of it, because obviously so many films just have a chase as a part of something bigger.
Yeah, I think there's certain films where sometimes the car can become like a character in itself, and something like that, like you say, the lead character is essentially the getaway driver, and the thing with the headphones and the music and all is a very important part of that. And I think the driving style in it has to be consistent throughout the movie, because, like you say, it's almost you making the car a character in itself. It sounds kind of corny, but it's true. People are expecting to see a certain thing when this car comes. When this vehicle comes onto the screen, just because it's always driven by this same guy, and he's got this style of driving. So for me, you have to think about that as much as you do if you're doing a fight and thinking about the physicality of a character. The physicality has to match what the director had in his mind for the character, and it's the same with that. You can't just be all neat and tidy, turning all the corners, whether it's fast or not. He just wanted it fast and loose and really, really going to the extremes of grip at all times with the cars, and that becomes its kind of signature.
Well, in addition to that as well, the music and timing and rhythm of music for that particular film was really important to the director of the right, Lloyd. So again, that just creates another level of consideration.
Absolutely, and I think again we come back to this whole collaboration of we're discussing action and stunts, and it's fantastic that we are, because obviously it's a great genre and we love it. But ultimately, for the viewer to see and feel a journey, all of those other things are so important, and even the type of car and the type of music to match the scene. There's so many professionals thinking about that. They will look at what we've shot and they will feel the scene, and then they will design something around what they feel, and also their brief from the director and the writer and whatever else about what they want from that scene itself. And also things like adaptations to the cars, because they pick a lovely car for you and you go, that's amazing, but that car's not going to do that. So then you'll do some demonstrations, you'll test things, and then you'll change things, and this is all the prep we were talking about. So to get those scenes, there's a lot of work gone into that, and also things like how much of it was him, how much of it had to be stunt driver, is there any face replacements, any of those things all create the illusion, which is what the film is for. It's to create the illusion of you're in that journey with them, so there's so much prep goes on.
Yeah, the cast of the car, very important. The music, without you even really thinking about it, how it draws you into the chase a lot of the time, doesn't it? But then interestingly, there are others that don't have music that also do the same. So it's just a style, isn't it? It's a creative style. So there are chases that don't have the music and they're just as exciting. But just to touch on when a main character is a driver, another thing that's available now is something called the pod car that we use quite a bit, which is helping out a lot when viewers want to see that it's the character driving. So I don't know whether you got anyone's heard of this, but it's a vehicle that's been, better talk about this later, but it's been built with a pod on top basically that drives the car. Have you heard about
So
it?
essentially all of the controls are on the roof of the car. So then there's a roll cage on the roof of the car in case of the unintended rollover. But again, this comes down to choice of drivers normally. But essentially, yeah, all the controls are on the roof of the car, so it is seamless. You can shoot 360 inside the car. Inside, outside, you can have cameras looking in, cameras in, looking out, and it will just look like the guy's driving as long as his or her ability matches what is happening to the car at the time. But essentially, yeah, generally we're on the roof.
So it gets directors out of a whole heap of problems because they're actually doing it like to look at. It's brilliant.
When do they start using those? Because obviously we've seen them on films. That sense of the driver set up with controls remotely.
2007 is the first time I remember Podcast being on set. I think that was on, what was the Nick Cage thing that we did in London?
National Treasure?
National Treasure 2.
Yeah.
National Treasure
Yeah.
2 was the first time I'd seen a podcar on there, and yeah, it was pretty special. But they're getting more and more common even in TV now. It's
Yes,
not
they are.
uncommon to have
Yeah.
a podcar. They tend to be a bit more generic. You know, the podcar will be on something like a generic saloon BMW or Mini or something that you can then wrap and change the colour of and use for different shows. Whereas obviously on movies they're usually built bespoke to a specific vehicle that's part of the part of the action sequence.
Now,
I was just going to say one more thing as well. Is the other thing that the podcar use isn't to take away from the actor any responsibility. Is to give him 100% of their responsibility to do the thing they're actually supposed to be doing, which is acting and selling that part. Because genuinely, if they were trying to do the driving and playing the part, it just wouldn't happen. There's going to be an accident somewhere, because
We won't be able to do it.
because it's functioning on, if you're trying to play a particular part, I know we've probably got a little bit of capability of that, but we won't maybe give as much depth to the character because though we can act and we have equity cards from the early days and we've performed quite a lot, but ultimately their job is to do that and our job is to keep it all nice and safe. So actually it's a collaboration again.
Lloyd, you could have perfectly queued up what is going to be choice number 3 that the audience is going to see now.
But not too long before Stunt Drivers doubling, so that's all
Yeah.
good. But they were good drivers, and the thing that there are parts of that film where it was them.
For sure.
And certainly I wouldn't want to detract from any of that. But there was also not really any dialogue, or movie look, stuff like that. But also being great drivers helps for the actors, and we do have some actors that are great drivers. So we definitely do use those when we can, and we definitely stick them in when we can. There comes a point when it's no longer safe to do so, and at that point you just have to pull them out, whether it's a pod, whether it's go nice and wide and just let's hide the driver for a moment. But also I think when you look at those cars, those roads, those drivers probably rode, the actors drove those cars probably all the time. They were in a lovely era in life where they could do whatever they wanted in whatever car park they wanted, literally. And now you can't do that anymore. So they came up in a great era as well, I think, where they were allowed to do all that sort of stuff.
I mean, it is an incredible era, Steph, when you look at it in particular. When you think back to stuff like Bullitt, and obviously, classic ones that people think of, is there a sense that you remember watching particular sequences in films when you were younger that really made an impression on you? Would Bullitt be possibly one of them?
I mean, yes, but Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah, that's it was more the team.
For anyone out here old enough
Dukes of
to
Hazzard.
Dukes of Hazzard, oh my god, that was it. If you just wanted to be a Dukes of Hazzard driving 01, man, let's go. But
What I really liked about this actually, there is a point at which Steve McQueen is driving and he understeers the car and doesn't quite make the corner, and then he just backs off and goes round. That would never happen now unless it's kind of written in to show that. But it's just a really great natural thing to show, I think, in that.
almost like a happy accident, but we don't know really. None of us were there, but we don't know. Did they say to him, "Look, you understeer and hit that"? I mean, he may have been that good that he could do that, or did he just understeer and hit that? Now, either way, it made the movie, so it ticked someone's box.
So that car, by the way, sold for $3.4 million in 2020. It's incredible, isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah. Just as a side.
No, that is a best. And also, it's not just about the nature of the stunts and the extent to which health and safety was perhaps a little bit different, but also the way that stuff is shot. The sense of sort of wider shots and things having to happen with no, as you say, no room for error, versus being able to cut something together that can hide mistakes or is deliberately done that way. When you're working, is there always a sense that what you're doing is going to be, you have to prepare for it as being as much as one sequence as possible? Or are you shooting things in the same way where you know that you're going to shoot something that's going to be X minutes or seconds long?
You talk about whether we're looking for specific parts of a sequence. Yeah, it normally with the vehicle stuff, for me, I think certainly on movies and stuff, when you're doing a big chase sequence, it normally plays in quite big big sections, you'll then come in and feature certain elements of that are sort of key points in the story, key story points. But you have to kind of know the whole journey, and it tends to play out because you use a lot of to keep people in the chase. You don't necessarily want to be cutting from here to there, back to here, back to there so much. Sometimes you've got to hold shots for longer and show geography of what's happening, so people can feel that they know where the chase is going, rather than just sitting, sort of cutting from a guy's face in one car to a guy's face in another car to a bit of a wheel or something. It doesn't tell the story necessarily, and so we'll use tracking vehicles, vehicles with cameras attached to them, which will be basically taking you through the route that the hero vehicles are taking, and then in the same way that these guys had on here, there's cameras inside the cars then that are taking you on that journey. You can hold those shots a lot longer because you're telling the story at the same time you're seeing the actors, and that's where the podcasts are really good as well, I think, is that you can take the actors on those journeys and stay with them, but still be travelling with them the whole time.
What's the longest sequence that you've been part of in making like?
The longest travel?
Yeah, in terms of ultimately as a chase, in terms of the duration on screen.
Oh, the longest duration on screen. I thought you meant the longest stretch of longest stretch of road that we had to
that
play
would be
with.
one of the Fast and Furious runways.
Yeah, I don't think it was that long. I think they just reused it and kept going back to the start again.
27 years later, but no, I mean, listen, all of that sort of stuff. It is what it is. It's to sell an energy and all that kind of stuff. And I think certainly length of chase. To go back to your question, I really don't know. I think I would have to trawl the archives for that one. And my brain is not going to do that. There's way too many hits. I'm 50 odd now.
Mine was The Cold Light of Day, which was a chase through Madrid, which I don't know how many minutes on screen, but it was fairly long, and we were out there for quite a number of weeks doing that.
And also the other thing is with these long chases is generally they'll be shot in, as Rick inferred earlier, bite-sized chunks, you know what I mean? But you can still have a lengthy bite-sized chunk. I mean, Batman, for instance, with Dunsfold, sort of created the runway, on the runway rather, created the motorway, and it was a long section. I mean, there was a lot going on, for anyone who's watched the movie, that was epic. But obviously that run, though not, it's not over miles, but it's a long run with all those things going on, and everything. You're doing all of those things every time, whether you're inside the car, outside the car, you're recreating all those things because the timing's there. Everything's in place already. So now it's just different placement of camera. And that's where the art comes in, I think, as far as the camera placement goes. And also things like, we've changed the way we do the cameras, tracking vehicles obviously, but then, the old days, they might have just had fixed cameras inside the car. Which actually I think have such a place in a car chase, because actually it's lovely because the world around is moving. And
this one on here, the POV on the front, up and down the cars, it's like you're on a roller coaster.
Yeah, exactly. And you get that sense of being in the journey with them. But of course, you can't just have that, really. I mean, but you can, and I think there's a film we might show that had a lot of it in it. But in fairness, I think that coupled with all of the energetic other shots just becomes amazing. There's no shot you can't find now with all the stuff that we have available to us.
Because so much of it you end up absorbing through all senses, not just your eyes, in terms of all of that. And we're going to visit that now in clip
again.
number 2. Huh?
Again, is this the next clip?
It's actually not that fast. Because the camera's on the front of the car, it's really low to the ground, and it just feels gritty, It's like, you're right there, and then the next second, boom, he's speeding and smashing through stuff.
I don't think it could be that fast. I don't think they had any lock-offs or anything.
They had no essays, no.
I was going to get to that, but yeah.
I mean, you just can't imagine that now, can you?
So that was basically shot with no lock-offs.
I wouldn't want to do that.
Let's go back to number
Explain
one.
what lock-offs are to the audience.
So lock-offs are basically safe areas within the roads that you're driving on. They're safely locked off, and maybe stunt people or SAs that know exactly what the vehicles are going to do. Everyone is aware. So it's safe areas basically.
Yeah, and you have little marshals everywhere. If anyone breaks that lock off, anyone who's not supposed to be in that action area, basically you'd stop the scene immediately, because you'd end up hurting someone who they might decide to cross the road. And then there's a car coming at 60 miles an hour.
Yeah, essentially with no lock-off, you're just in live traffic. I mean,
So-
you are just in live traffic. You're in amongst people who have no idea what's going on and no idea that you're shooting a movie and that you're going to be doing crazy maneuvers.
So when they shot that, it's actually quite real, because when they shot it, none of the cars knew what was going on. They were genuinely swerving out the way.
So I won't name jobs, but the three of us were on a job, and
Together.
yeah, they don't know what I'm going to say, but the three of us were on a job, and the guy it was a night shoot, and the guy that was meant to be holding the lock off had fallen asleep, and we were on a highway, a dual carriageway.
We're not going to name the job either.
No, we're not going to name the job. Anyway, someone came on in our convoy, and we were going at high speeds, and he was drunk. He
I was actually driving at oncoming traffic at
Yeah.
speed, and I'd rehearsed. Obviously, we'd shot before and also rehearsed it. So in my head, I knew how many cars I was passing. I knew which cars they were, and all of a sudden at the end of the run, there's another car, and I'm thinking, oh, I don't really know if I should swerve towards him, because I'm sure I've counted enough cars already. So I actually took evasive action and didn't go anywhere near him. And as it turns out, I think he'd had a couple of drinks and decided to break
a couple of bottles, I think.
Yeah. So as it was, obviously the skill and experience actually, to be honest, does save the day on a lot of occasions. But
Could have been serious. Yeah.
I'm assuming that's the only time, or something of that. I mean, that's
it's probably going to we should probably keep talking about.
No, it does still happen. Sometimes if it's just regular driving sequences that you want to do and it's not like a high-speed chase and crashes and interacting with other cars and people, if it's just literally driving along the road, then sometimes it's in regular traffic and stuff, and people would be surprised at some of the stuff that's a bit more kind of guerrilla like that. Not everything is necessary to lock the road off.
Yeah, we call it guerrilla, but actually all it means really is that you're not securing the road as we described earlier. You're basically allowing the road to flow. You'll have police approval, there'll be locations approval, there will be marshals still looking for, even if it's as simple as an ambulance needs to get through your set. So, you know, if an ambulance is coming, we'll get called because we'll just move out of the way and let everyone else worry about what they're doing, but we'll certainly this. There are still people watching what we're doing, but generally it wouldn't be at high speed, it would only be within the normal road confines. You'd be travelling the correct way up a road, all that sort of stuff. But of course, if we lock the road and we own it, we go whichever way we like and however fast we like with approval.
But I think you just learn to have eyes in the back of your head, because wherever you film, you know, people can come from anywhere, doors can open, people can come out, so you're always on the...
It's almost a sixth sense, to be honest. Like the thing when I got to the end of the run and saw the car, I was like, well, I think you should be there. Sure, it's not supposed to be there, and you're sort of second guessing yourself. But ultimately, you have to trust yourself, because if your gut says something, your gut's probably right before you can think it. And I think if you do enough of something, you'll react to a thing before your brain is even engaged. You know, you'll just know something is not right, and whether that be even watching a scene. You know, you could be sitting in the car waiting at the start of a chase, and I will generally be very unsociable at that point, because I'm watching everything that's going on outside me. I'm watching where they're placing SAs, you know, and other actors. I might be looking at where they're placing things, just objects, whether whatever it be just a roadside bin. You know, I'll be wanting to know where it is, and I will literally map out the route in my head. And then when I go down that route, I know what I'm expecting to see, and I want to see a rehearsal of where SAs are crossing the road, or if there's a stunt person crossing the road, or if there's little clusters of people. Anything is all good information, and then by the time you go for the take, all of that's already in there. And if something isn't right, you will stop. You know what I mean? Immediately.
Well, and for something where it all did go right, and ultimately it's certainly one of my favourite scenes in a really good film, but stand out as we have in number one. That is really quite something. Unlike French Connection, they were going fast.
Absolutely, and actually it was really well shot. I think it was, at the time as well, it was super gritty. You was in there, you felt like there was so much energy in that chase, and I think that's probably why it wins, to be fair. And it was just really well shot, yeah.
There's some really nice set pieces in that chase as well, and it goes back to what you were saying before about how long the run would be. A lot of the time, if there's something like where he cuts through from one side to the other, whatever, when they actually feature that, it's a small gap and he's going fast, and he's I'm not saying he's taking a chance, but I'm saying that the danger is definitely upped when you're featuring that piece of action. And what we might do is to shoot the action around that before and after that, they would probably skip over that section and maybe widen the part that he has to go through, and then on the day they would tighten it up, and when they actually come to feature it. And that's what we do a lot of the time, is that something that has an element of risk or is going to be shot as a special, like a very specific piece of action, you'll run the whole action, and then when you get to that part, then whatever you're going to smash through on the day will be missing, and you'll just say, okay, so you would have smashed through the things out, and then we're back to usable footage for before and after that, and that's what happens quite a lot, and I'm guessing that's what these guys would have done.
Yeah.
So.
And also with those little specials, those little specials that we're talking about there, because you get the feel of the general chase. Once you come in close, it's really you do that as a set piece, not because it can't be done in the scene. It can be, but ultimately you want to see it. So if you're doing a set piece, you don't need all the other 80% of the chase. You need the set piece. So ultimately, they set the cameras to capture the set piece, because that's what it's all about. So it isn't for any other reason than you can really magnify the enormity of that set piece. That's all it is. But generally we would still do the whole chases, and there may be occasions where the gaps are slightly bigger. But generally, it's so they can capture it really well. And also carpet, I even need to put a roll cage in for that one.